Hello everyone, glad you can join me here again today. We got some great stuff that we want to be talking about. The first thing that we want to talk about, and before I get started, I just want to say that I appreciate each and every one of you, the thousands of people that watch the videos. Really is something special. But today I got something special for all you guys because we want to be talking about first the Andrew Yang's and Ben Shapiro Show. Andrew Yang was on the Ben Shapiro Show last week, and we want to be talking about nothing within the video itself so much as why did Andrew Yang go on the Ben Shapiro Show at all. So that will be something that we'll be delving into. The second thing we want to talk about is third parties and how social media has sort of created this situation where the benefits that we would get from a third party are given to us by social media without any of the downsides. And the third thing we want to talk about are filler words. Like, you know, so, these types of filler words. And I'm going to tell you how to fix filler words. So how to stop saying these types of filler words in about 2 minutes. So it takes about 2 minutes to fix this problem. And unfortunately, there's a lot of politicians, a lot of tech people, startup people especially, who give a lot of public speeches, and they use a lot of filler words. And I'm going to tell you how to fix it. And unfortunately, our boy Andrew Yang says quite a lot. So I want to tell him how to fix this in about 2 minutes. It's something that you would pay a public speaking coach a whole bunch of money to figure out for you, but I'm going to tell you how to do it for free because that's what I do, and it takes about 2 minutes. So anyway, first thing we want to talk about is Andrew Yang's appearance on Ben Shapiro. Okay, we're good to go. So Andrew Yang was on the Ben Shapiro Show, and people were asking me for my prediction on how that would go. And there was a lot of people who thought that Ben Shapiro would try and destroy Andrew Yang with facts and logic. And there's other people who thought that it would be an hour-long debate on circumcision, which no, it wasn't. It was never going to be that. But my prediction was that if you were going to write an article about how the talk went, that you would be able to end that article with the phrase, "and a good time was had by all." And I think that's exactly what happened. It was a very good, a very respectful talk between two people who are very smart. And both Ben Shapiro and Andrew Yang are intellectual type people, meaning that they are comfortable within the realm of ideas and in the realm of theory, and they have no problem diving deep into the details of different policies, different ideas, different philosophies. And there was a few times during that talk, I'm sure you agree, there's a few times during that discussion where I was like, I don't know how any other politician would have answered this question. Like, what would Kamala Harris have responded to this question with? How would she have answered this? And Andrew Yang is quite unique in that regard, in that he's a intellectual type of candidate. He's perfectly happy discussing these sorts of topics in depth. And that was quite a good talk and quite refreshing to see, I thought. It was just a fun talk. But why did Andrew Yang go on the Ben Shapiro Show? I haven't heard too many people ask that question. And on the surface, it can seem as if it would be a mistake, because now Andrew Yang is going to be associated with the alt-right, because Ben Shapiro, I guess, according to the mainstream media, is alt-right, whatever that means. It means different things depending on who you talk to. And so Andrew Yang has been associated with the alt-right. He's friends with Eric Weinstein, who also is alt-right, even though he's politically left. It's a strange, I made this joke on my Twitter. If Andrew Yang and Eric Weinstein had a conversation, it would probably be described by the mainstream media as an alt-right conversation, even though they're both politically left, which is this funny situation where two lefts make an alt-right? I don't know. But anyway, I wanted to talk about, why did Andrew Yang go on the Ben Shapiro Show? Who is he targeting? What voters was he hoping to gain out of this discussion? And what I came up with and what I sort of realized was that he was probably targeting some combination, some motley crew of voters who are politically sympathetic to the left and to the progressive ideologies and to the Democratic Party, but they aren't quite thrilled with how the Democratic Party has been operating as an establishment. And he's probably targeting people who think that Trump has done a good job, but are unconvinced that Trump is able to solve the biggest problems that are on the horizon and the biggest problems that we're encountering right now. Because there's probably a segment of Trump voters, and tell me if you know anyone like this, but there's probably a segment of Trump voters that think that Trump has done a good job with all of the things that he's been able to directly impact. And these things would be stuff like ISIS. So ISIS is pretty much destroyed. Stuff like North Korea, where that seems to be heading in the right direction for the first time in recent history, modern history, since North Korea has really been around. Things like deregulation, where Trump has done a lot of good deregulation and stuff that business people have really responded well to. Stuff like the economy, where according to all the economic indicators that people look at, the economy is moving in the right direction. Unemployment is moving in the right direction, GDP, the stock market. And there's problems, of course, with all of these metrics. And I think most of the viewers of the show would probably tell me that. They would say, GDP, you can't use GDP as a measure of a healthy economy. And I agree. I would agree with that. But it's not so much the metric itself or the number itself. Rather, it's what direction are those numbers moving in. So you can assume that the economy is improving if your unemployment is getting lower, if your GDP is getting higher, if the stock market is moving in the right direction. And it's less about what the number is at the moment and more about the direction of those numbers. So all of those things on those levels, and probably more, Trump has done well with, because he's been able to directly impact those situations without too much intervention from Congress. But the remaining problems, the biggest problems that we have yet to solve, problems like healthcare, problems like immigration, really are sort of impossible for Trump to solve because of the incredible amount of divisiveness within the political world and within the political, we'll call it that, within the political world. And it's a situation that Trump himself didn't create, but he certainly exacerbated this problem just by how he operates. So whenever someone goes against him, he attacks them at least as strong, if not stronger, than he was attacked. And that's sort of his brand. And that was how he won the election. His theory wasn't, I need to be the most popular candidate. Rather, he operated with this thinking of, I don't need to be the most popular. I just need to be more popular than the person I'm running against. So it doesn't matter if my approval rating is in the 40s if my opponent is in the 20s. So politics is very much, you vote for the lesser of two evils, and we'll talk more about that later. But he operated and thought about how he ran his candidacy based on being just more popular than the other person. It's that old adage of, you don't have to outrun the bear, you just have to outrun the slowest runner. And that was kind of how he ran his campaign. But the remaining problems are probably problems that Trump can't solve because he helped create these problems. So this incredible amount of divisiveness, this incredible amount of inability to compromise, because if someone on the left wants to break ranks and compromise with someone on the right, they will be absolutely destroyed by their own party and by the media because of the level of divisiveness that Trump has helped create. So Andrew Yang probably goes on the Ben Shapiro Show to target these types of voters. the types of voters who do not think that Trump has the right tools in his toolbox to correctly address the level of divisiveness and the economic revolution that's happening. So you'll never see Trump come out for something like universal basic income or address those problems in a way that's adequate. And Andrew Yang has been the one who's correctly identified this problem and has talked about solutions, whether you like the solutions or not. He's at least coming up with new ideas that are seemingly radical, but they are ideas that would address, and he's talking about and trying to solve, these problems that are coming on the horizon. And I would suspect that there is a good amount of Trump voters who think that he's done a pretty good job, but the remaining problems such as divisiveness, such as the incoming wave of automation, AI, and robots, he just doesn't have the tools in his toolbox, and it's rather impossible for him to solve these problems. And just real quick, immigration, healthcare, these are problems that have to be solved within the political sphere. So politicians have to get together and solve these problems. And when you have an incredible amount of divisiveness where you can't compromise because you've created a situation where the other side just hates you that much or just dislikes you that much, you can't get to anything that looks like a win. Because if someone compromises, it's going to look like a really big loss on their part, and that's how the media is going to portray it. And there's a big problem with this divisiveness because Republicans and Democrats can't get together, and the solution really would look like a third-party candidate who is able to come in and unite both parties to solve these sorts of issues. And you always hear people talk about how great it would be if we had a third party. So how wonderful would it be if we had a third party that was able to take ideas that are outside of the political orthodoxy and bring them into the political conversation, bring them into the political mainstream. Now, third parties also have a lot of problems. There's one problem in particular with if a third party comes into power and they have enough influence, there can be situations where the third party actually has all of the power and all of the control over what gets passed, what gets discussed. Because if two sides get into a stalemate, they're locked in like this, and the third party is the only one who can break the stalemate by deciding which side to go with, then in that scenario, they're the ones who are in control, and they get to have an inordinate amount of influence. They have a lot more power. And this would be fantastic if we love the third party, or if the third party are rational actors and they have great ideas all of the time. But that's not always the case. The one scenario that I can think of is, and I'm not sure if this is the case anymore, but I know in Israel, for instance, there is a very large party of Orthodox and Hasidic Jews, and they control a lot of the political processes. And a lot of the things that people wouldn't otherwise go for, they find themselves supporting in the political world because it means that they will be able to get a majority vote to get their things passed. So you have this situation where the Hasidic Jews are getting a lot of things passed just because they are the third party that can break the stalemate. I'm not sure if that's the situation currently. I'm not up on my Israeli politics. I know Bibi Netanyahu won. Congrats to Bibi. But it's not something that I know too much about. But I know that this used to be the case, and it's a good example of this point where the third party that exists would have an extreme amount of influence, probably more than you would want, especially if they're a third party that you don't really care for. But because we live in an age of social media, it seems as if we have this situation where you can run as practically a third party candidate and you don't have any of those negative downsides. Donald Trump and Andrew Yang very much are running like third-party candidates. Because when Donald Trump ran, if you remember, he had a lot of ideas and a lot of policies that fell outside of the Republican mainstream orthodoxy, meaning the mainstream Republican ideals, right? Things like immigration. If you remember, before 2016, the general consensus within the Republican Party was more about amnesty and giving people who entered the country illegally, how do we give them citizenship, how do we get them into the system? And then Donald Trump comes along with a brand new way of thinking about things, with securing the border, get rid of the problem of illegal immigration by stopping all illegal immigration instead of giving amnesty. Another big one was free trade. So the Republican orthodoxy was free trade, even if it hurts us a little bit, because that will be better for the economy. And Donald Trump comes along and says, well, we would love free trade, but we can't do free trade if other countries aren't acting in good faith. Because if you have a situation like in China, where China is taking advantage of us economically, then in that scenario, tariffs, and a tariff is a tax on imported goods, tariffs might be a useful negotiating tool to ensure that other players, other economic actors are acting in good faith. And this was something that was completely new. And this is something that a third-party candidate would have been able to come up with. Something that's really strong on the right side of the political spectrum, which is immigration. Something which is really strong on the left side of the political spectrum, which is tariffs and barriers to trade and not totally being a free trader. And able to merge those two ideas into this one cohesive package. And that's what a third-party candidate would be able to do. That's what a third-party candidate gets you. It gets you ideas from both sides of the political spectrum and then fuses them into the middle. That's what Andrew Yang is doing. If you are paying attention, you know Andrew Yang is for a secured border, because you can't give people $1,000 a month if you don't have a secured border, because then you have this crazy problem where people from all over the place are getting into the country just for the $1,000, and it's not a sustainable situation. And whether you agree or disagree, I'll let you take that up with Andrew Yang. But he's able to take ideas such as a secured border, which is a idea that is strong on the right, and also universal basic income, which is an idea that's strong on the left. And he's able to fuse these two ideas together like a third-party candidate would. And before, in the past, this wouldn't be possible. Because before, in the past, you relied on establishment support in order to get your ideas out into the public mainstream world. So if you were running as a Republican candidate, you had to have ideas that the Republican Party agreed with, because the Republican Party would be the ones who decided how much funding you got for your campaign, whether or not you got a lot of attention, whether you were getting the institutional support. And same thing on the Democrats. If you were a Democrat, you had to run on Democratic ideals, because the Democratic Party would be the ones pushing your campaign and giving you the resources necessary to run your campaign, and also the political weight to get your things passed once you get into office. And outside this establishment, there's also the mainstream media. So the mainstream media would have to take your ideas and then push them into the mainstream. And then you're kind of relying on the mainstream media to promote your candidacy. But today, in the social media world, that's not necessarily the case, because you're able to take your ideas and bring them into the mainstream direct to the voter. There's no one telling you how to tweet on Twitter. That's totally up to you, unless you allow someone to tell you how to tweet, of course. But people like Andrew Yang, people like Donald Trump recognize this fact, and they're taking their ideas directly to the voter, just like a third-party candidate would. And what happens is, once these ideas get enough traction, once they get enough attention, it forces the party to adapt to your way of thinking instead of you adapting to their way of thinking. And so there's this interesting new paradigm coming up where it's more important that you're relevant on social media instead of being relevant within the establishment of your own party. Bernie Sanders is another good example of this. He wasn't even a Democrat until a few months before he ran. But because he was able to take his ideas directly to the voters via social media, he was able to get an inordinate amount of influence, inordinate meaning more than you would expect, or a lot. He was able to get a lot more influence than you would have expected, because he was able to get so much attention online and with social media. And so we have this situation where what we would want from a third-party candidate and what we would want from a third party in general, we are getting because of social media. And that's why it's so important for candidates to be really strong on social media. And Andrew Yang's social media game is pretty good. And we'll talk about that more in a different video, but he uses social media the best because he is the most authentic on social media. Authenticity goes to relatability. Relatability goes to the principle of liking. And liking is one of the 6 persuasive weapons of influence, if you want to call it that, that Robert Cialdini talks about. And that's a whole nother video that I'm really excited to talk about. But that is the third party candidate talk. And the last thing that I want to talk about is uhs and ums. Uhs and ums. For some reason, it blows my mind whenever I see politicians who really are professional public speakers, right? That's part of their job description, is to give speeches in public. You see a lot of politicians using a lot of filler words. A lot of sentences are started with and and you know and like and so, and you know, I come from a public speaking background, so whenever I hear these sorts of words, it's just jarring in my mind. It's like a big red flag. I see it, I notice it, and it bothers me. And so if I can do something to fix this problem, because Andrew Yang starts a lot of his sentences with and a lot of his thoughts with and different filler words have different meanings behind them as to why people are using them. For instance, you know is a common filler word, and that means if you're using a lot of you knows, or you see someone using a lot of you knows, it's because they're self-conscious about the fact that they're getting through to you and they want some sort of response to make sure that they're being understood. So they add in a lot of you knows, you know. So that is one of the filler words. The one that I use a lot is so, and it's not a problem if you use them sparingly. If you use filler words sparingly, no one's even going to notice, and it's not a big deal at all. But the problem with and is that, imagine you're giving a speech, and before I get into it, I'm going to tell you how to fix it, so don't worry. I'm not just going to say the problem and then leave. I'm going to tell you how to fix it. It takes 2 minutes tops. But the problem with imagine you're giving a speech and someone's paid you for the speech, or someone has made the effort to come see you speak. So they're rooting for you. They want to see a good speech. They want to see what you have to say. Imagine that you have a credibility meter, and your credibility meter starts at 100. So you start as very, very credible. You're at 100. You've maxed out the scale. Each and that you say chips away at that credibility meter. So for every it's like ding, down a point, you get to 99. Ding, 98, that's another point. And if you do it once or twice, it's no problem. Your credibility at 98, still pretty good. No one even notices. It's perfectly fine. But over a long speech and over a period of time, the more uhs and ums that you use, the more your credibility meter starts to go down. And a good example of this, I have a good friend who is at the top the top of her industry. She's in the entertainment industry. She's very, very smart. And she does this thing where if you ask her a question that she is unprepared to answer, and she has to think about it, she doesn't use filler words. She'll just stop and stare off into space. And it's really interesting when she does this, because I find myself hanging on the edge of my seat thinking, well, what is she going to come up with? She's very smart. I know she's smart. So if she's thinking about something, this is going to be pretty good. I can't wait to see what she comes up with. It's building tension. A pause builds tension, and tension is a very good thing when you're giving this type of public speech. When you're giving a public speech, or when you're dealing with other people, we'll talk about that in a second, but she would do this thing where she stares off into space. So I'd ask a question like, hey, Rebecca, not her name. Hey, Rebecca, where do you want to go eat? I was visiting her in New York City. She's a New York City person, and so you know that there's tons of places to eat in New York City. So I'd go over there and I'd ask, hey, Rebecca, where do you want to eat? And she would stop and stare off. I'm thinking, oh man, I pretty good question. I can't wait to see what she comes up with. And she'd stare and take a pause. And then she'd say, we have 3 options. The first option is a little bit farther away, but it's very good and you're going to like it. The second option is the place that I normally go to. It's pretty good and it's also pretty cheap. It's within your budget. And the third place that we're going to go to, or that is our option, third place I've never been to, but it's pretty cheap and it should be pretty good. But those are the three options. Which one do you want to pick? And so after I get that type of answer, I'm thinking, wow, these are all great options. No matter what option I pick, it's going to be a good one. Now I have to think, which one do I want to pick? These are all fantastic. I'm not even thinking about any other options. These three options seem fantastic. That was a very credible, very well thought out response. I saw her thinking about it. These must be very good options. Imagine if instead of that, she gave me an answer something like this. So I said, hey, Rebecca, where do you want to go eat? And she, there's one place and it's pretty good and it's expensive and it's a little bit farther away, but it's really good. But there's another place that it's pretty good and it's the place that I normally go to, and it's cheaper and it's within your budget. There's another place, I've never been there, but it's pretty good, I hear, and it should be all right. I don't know. What do you think? Pick one of those. If I get that type of answer, I'm thinking, okay, so you don't really know. You don't really have any strong ideas of where we want to go. Let me look online. Let me see what other options there are. Let me try and come up with an idea of my own. Let me see if I can come up with something. And nothing changed with the information that she gave me. The only thing that changed was her delivery of it. The only thing that changed was the credibility of the answer that I got. And the only different factor was the use of uhs and ums. So the uhs and ums chip away at your credibility, even if your information is solid, even if you know what you're talking about. Every and makes me, the listener, feel more uncertain about you, the speaker. Every I'm less sure that you actually know what you're talking about. And it's not exactly rational, it's not exactly logical, but it is something that exists. It's something that our minds take in as information and interpret as uncertainty. And we don't really like uncertainty. The other problem with us and is that it's an opportunity cost. So it's a missed opportunity. Because whenever you get a tough question or whenever you have to stop and think, what you do is you build tension. And we as humans, especially talking to other humans, we don't like tension. We like to try and avoid tension. That's why we say and to try and fill that dead air, fill that dead space. And especially when you're giving a public speech, I know when I'm doing these videos, for instance, every second of dead air feels like an eternity. It feels as if, oh man, I'm losing the viewers. I'm not saying anything. On radio, it's a big deal, especially because the number one killer on radio is dead air. You don't want any dead air at any time. So you get that dead air and you're thinking, oh man, I'm in trouble now. I don't know what I'm talking about. Oh man. But that's not actually what happens. It feels like that's what's happening, but that's not what happens. What happens is you're building interest in the audience. So people are sitting at the edge of their seats thinking, man, oh man, what's this response going to be? I can't wait to hear this one. And there's a bit of a tactical, or there's a good way to do this, because it can look like you just got stumped if you just take a pause. But there's a good way to do this, and I'll give you an example of it. But I'm going to tell you how to fix it. It takes 2 minutes. Very quick. It's easy to fix. Something that you would pay a public speaking coach a lot of money to figure out for you. And here's how you fix it. Are you ready? Here's how you fix it. I'm going to build some tension first. The way you fix it is you get the person you're trying to improve their public speaking. So we'll use Andrew Yang in this case. You get Andrew Yang, you put him in a room in front of 15 people that he knows. So it can be any number, but 15 is a pretty good number. You get him in a room of 15 people and you have him talk about a topic or deliver a speech about a topic that he has not prepared for, or something that he hasn't talked about before. And then every time you hear the word you're trying to target, in this case it's and every time you hear and the 15 people in the audience just go nuts. They start banging on the table, they get an air horn and they throw in chairs, they just go crazy, they go absolutely nuts. They make as much noise as possible, they're as distracting as possible, and they're just out of control chaos for a few seconds. Every time you hear you just bing, 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 you just go nuts. And that's how you fix it. So you have Andrew Yang go up in front of a group of people and you say, all right, Andrew Yang, you have 2 minutes. Name the 5 things you would take with you on a deserted island. Ready? Go. And every time you hear ding, 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 you just go nuts. So he might say something like, well, the first thing that I would bring with me on an island is ding, 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 bop, 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 bop. You just going nuts every time you hear it. After about 2 minutes of doing that, your brain starts to take this information and it says, okay, every time I say this word, it's absolute chaos. Every time I say this word, something I don't want to happen starts to happen. So instead of saying this word, I'm going to now self-censor and just pause. I'm just going to pause and try and figure out something else because I can't say this word. I know what happens when I say the word, chaos happens. And so after about 2 minutes, that is what the brain starts to do. And I've seen this take someone who says filler words like 3 or 4 uhs in a sentence, every sentence, and they're an absolute mess, getting nowhere with their speech. I've seen this technique and this method take someone from 3 or 4 uhs a sentence to about 1 or 2 uhs in the entire speech, which is perfectly fine. I mean, about a 90% reduction. People who are really bad with the filler words, this eliminates them almost entirely. And it's because of this brain's reaction, this brain's way of trying to avoid pain. Everything we do is to either maximize pleasure or avoid pain. And so this is playing on the idea of trying to avoid pain. It's sort of like self-censoring yourself around your parents. So you don't want to say bad words around your parents. And if you remember the first time you said a bad word around your parents, they got this look of disappointment and, oh, I can't believe you said that word. And that was a way, that's a method, an example of your brain taking this negative response and then incorporating it into now your new way of dealing with your parents. So instead of saying this bad word, I'm just going to stop and then substitute it for another word. And so what you actually end up having is a speech that sounds something along the lines of, Brian, give us a speech. Your 5 favorite breakfast cereals. Ready, go. And I would stop and I would pause and I would say, well, and this is what I was talking about as far as the tactful way to do this. So it can look like you're stumped, but if you do something like this, it will help you out. It has to look like you're thinking. That's the key here. So you say something like 5 favorite brands of cereal for the morning. Ready, go. And I'd say, well, it's important to think about when you're thinking about breakfast cereals, you want something that is going to fit your morning routine, something that's going to give you energy in the morning. And so for my first choice, you have to go with Cheerios. And I'm going to include the frosted kind. Cheerios are, of course, a big staple, and they will set you right in the future for the rest of your day. And you just keep going off on something like that. The key thing here is instead of saying or I said, well, and then there was movement. So maybe move my shoulders, I'm looking off, raise the hand, and then when I have whatever it is I'm going to talk about, I look and I deliver. So that pause is building tension. You're getting ready for what it is that I'm about to say, and I'm getting you on the edge of your seat. And the pause, the movement, it allows me to come up with something. It gives me some time to think. And the thing that I come up with is you have to think about what your morning routine is going to be and what is it that you want to accomplish in the morning with your breakfast. None of that is important words. Those are more words to get me to get me to think more. It gives me more time. It buys me more time. That's all that was. And I wouldn't be able to come up with that if I'm panicking with the uhs and the ums, and I'm already destroying my own credibility. But anyway, that is how you fix uhs and ums with that technique. You have 15 people. They just go absolutely nuts whenever they hear the word that it is that you want to target. And if you did that for about 2 minutes, I think we would see, especially Andrew Yang, we would see him dramatically reduce the amount of filler words that he uses. And you can use this technique on your own as well, and it's going to help you with all of your public speeches and all of your interpersonal communication from now until forevermore. But that's what we had to talk about today. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I know I enjoyed talking about it. And I will see you guys all next time. Bye-bye.